You're listening to Not Your Average CEO Lifeline with your hosts, Danielle Cuomo, CEO, and Nicole Galicchio, L, COO. We are here to provide you with a vital lifeline to executive advice that you've never heard before. We have the resources and the tactics to help you reach the next level. Whether you are just starting out or you've been in business for decades, listen in for exclusive tips and content to meet your needs. Welcome back to yet another episode of Not Your Average CEO Lifeline. Today, we are going to talk about creating a highly engaged community. I have special guest AJ Amyx with me today. And this is a topic that I know is front of mind for most business owners and entrepreneurs. Having an engaged community, one that you interact with on a regular basis, a high following, is really front of mind for everyone, and it is a hot topic. So I'm happy to have you here with us, AJ. Can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to be here, Nicole. Thanks for having me. I've been in the online, expert space, is what you would call it, for 12 years. I remember back in the day before we had ClickFunnels and a lot of the technology where we kind of had to hand code things and write HTML and all of those things. And so I've been in this game for what feels like 40 years, because like internet years are different than like linear years, it seems like.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been a lot of fun helping people build communities, helping people, build 7-figure businesses online. I'm coaching people from just starting up to coaching to people who have, 7-figure businesses. It's just been a lot of fun, wild ride.
It does feel, though, being in this space as well for almost 2 decades, it feels double.
Yes.
It goes by much quicker in this virtual realm than it does, working hands-on. But that's for another topic. Today, We're talking about engaging with everyone in today's community. So can you tell our audience about why in today's very, very competitive atmosphere, having an engaged community is highly important? And I think more importantly, we're using the term engaged community. What do you consider that to be, and what should the standard be?
So for me, an engaged community it's almost kind of like if people were sitting around a campfire and if everybody's just standing there looking at each other, is that an engaged conversation? I think many people would say, no, it's not an engaged conversation. That's just people or friends or family hanging around a campfire, not saying anything at all. But if it was an engaged family, if they're an engaged, well-connected family or friends, there's going to be these conversations that are be going back and forth. There's going to be multiple conversations that are be going back and forth. There's going to be referrals and recommendations that are going to be happening. Like it's this I would call it just an engaged conversation. So for me, that same principle is applied to creating like this virtual online community. It's like, how can we see people as people? How can we create a safe space where it is like everybody gathered around that campfire, where they want to share, where they can share whatever that they feel led to share that's relevant to the family values and the family dynamics. And there is a safe, welcome, loving space where people are happy to give recommendations or share what they're going through. To me, that's what kind of this highly engaged community is all about. Rather than, I think a lot of people use community as just kind of like this customer service space, rather than like, hey, how do we curate? How do we create? How do we orchestrate this very warm, welcoming environment around specific topics and specific values where people can congregate, they can gather, they want to be there, they want to share those conversations. For me, that's what a highly engaged community is about.
I like that you said this warm environment. I think that the virtual atmosphere is very cold, right? It's very isolating. It's quite independent.
Yeah.
So what are your 3 keys to creating this warm engagement and this warm environment with your audience?
Well, the first key is really understanding that community is more than a value add. I think a lot of people, they build a course or they create a service or they create some type of event, and then they kind of think of community as this afterthought where they're like, okay, well, let's just throw a community in there, let people have their conversations, and put a number on it, make it a value item, and just, there you go, value add for community. Congratulations. And I think that's a complete wasted opportunity, because like when we start looking at the stats, I was looking at like these stats from Sell Courses Online, And they showed that 66% like if communities, like 66% of the people said that the community positively impacted customer retention. They went on to say that 68% generated more leads, 55% saw an increase in sales. They also noted that customers spent 19% more with the company after joining and participating inside of the community. And so I see like this is a huge opportunity. Part of this is a huge opportunity because I don't think we can question right now if Chat GPT and if AI are revolutionizing things. They totally are. Like they're totally revolutionizing the coaching, course creation, the membership industries. I mean, they're helping people crank out content like a machine, because we used to be able to say, well, just create content, just nurture people with content. And that's what's going to create this warm, inviting kind of atmosphere, right? But with content generated by machines, I don't know if you feel this way, Nicole. I experience this. I feel like some of the content, a lot of the content these days feels cold and distant. It doesn't have this warmth. And now this is going to sound maybe really strange, but hang with me here. I don't know if you've ever received a birthday card from your grandmother or one of your grandmothers, or maybe some beloved family member at some point in time. I know I have. And here's a crazy experience that I had, and every single human being I've talked to up to this point had a very similar experience. When you open up the card from your grandmother, that beloved family member, it's a piece of paper. And then there's ink on that paper where typically the family member, the grandmother, has written some little note to you. And then when you read it, something magical tends to happen, which is you hear their voice. And more importantly, you feel and have this emotional experience. You feel the state in which that person was in when they wrote that card to you. This is very interesting because if we look at just like the facts, it's just a piece of paper that was written by a human and there's ink on a piece of paper. But however, there's this untouchable magic in there where you have an experience. My experience has been when humans create content and they pour their heart and soul into the content, something like you call it their life force, you call it their inspiration, you can call it their spirit, I don't know what you want to call it, their emotional state, it transfers through them, through their fingertips, into the keyboard, into the content. And there's still the possibility, if the content is created with intention, there's still an emotional experience that takes place, just like opening up that card. So I see when people start creating content, they start creating community with intention, they're able to start creating, how we opened up this podcast, those campfire type experiences. And I do not see how AI or Chat GPT or any other chatbots in the future could replicate that intention being poured out into the space, into that online community. And to me, that's the first key, is realizing community is way more than just a value add. Like it can be the number one thing that your course, that your online experience, your online event, even your service-based business could completely hinge on. And it's one of the things that can completely separate you from all of the market, because when everybody else is trying to do everything at scale and do stuff with faster, more effective, and I'm not against using any of the tools, I'm just entertaining the possibility of what happens, what could happen for a company if they started to really approach community as more than a value add and actually put intention into crafting that space. To me, that is the first key, Nicole.
I couldn't agree more, AJ. I recently did a coffee bite segment on our podcast that talks about what's happening right now to all of our content creators, all of our artists, everything that, even our graphic designers, right? And our video editors, where AI can simply just run through it. It looks professional, it looks great. But there's no purpose or intention or voice behind it. And I couldn't agree more that yes, the content is being pumped out very fast and effectively. And obviously it can write a lot more than your fingers can type, or you could speak to text. But I feel that everyone also now knows that articles are likely not written by the person behind it, and they're just like that, like mass email. Mass email is gone, right? There's no point behind mass emails anymore. It's spam.
Yep.
So our article's going to become spam as well. And how do you know whether or not it was actually written by AI? Like a lot of us have an eye for it now if you use it regularly, but are you able to trust that the person that wrote it actually wrote it and has knowledge on it, right? Did
Exactly.
they really think about all of this stuff? Is this something they have experience with, or did AI calculate it? So I completely align with everything that you said about key number one, and I am very excited to hear what key number two is, because key number one was big.
So the second key that I see is micro communities, like use micro communities to grow your online business. And here's why. 70% of millennials buying decisions are influenced by micro communities, which is kind of crazy to think about it. But if I think about myself, and it's kind of hard for me to consider myself a millennial. I'm 38, so I'm like kind of a millennial, but I'm kind of not a millennial. I'm kind of on the
I'm right
cusp.
there with you. I'm
So
right there with you. We teeter, right? We're in that space where we shift back and forth, I think.
Exactly. I tend to tend towards the non-millennial personally, but sometimes I'm like, I guess I am. I don't know. Maybe you can relate. But I can look at my own buying behavior. Like my wife and I, we're looking at moving to Spain here come May of this year for, I don't know how long we'll stay. Maybe we'll stay for a long time. Maybe we won't, but we're going to go. And so we're finding ourselves joining micro communities of expats, right? We're actually just kind of watching the conversations and seeing what people are saying and where they're moving to. And so I can see even in my own buying behavior when I'm making decisions, how micro communities influence like a bit of my decision making. Like I'm looking at going to Gijón, or we're looking at going to San Sebastian, or we're looking to go to Bilbao up in the northern part of Spain to stay in the mountains and on the beach as well. And I'm like, oh, I didn't know Santander was another city. Oh, I didn't know this place had Celtic culture. Like all of this information's coming from micro communities. So I find oftentimes if an expert or a business owner will think through like, okay, how could I solve a very specific problem for a very specific person? And then I can build a micro community around that. That's going to help start warming people up and building relationships with people. And you're not really having to like, all right, let me convince you that I know how to help you. Instead, you could use a micro community to just demonstrate your ability to help them solve that small problem. And then if you use that, you can use that and leverage that to then start being like, hey, now that I've helped you solve this small problem, would you like to solve this bigger problem? And more people be like, well, yeah, I would love to do that. You just helped me with this. So I'd like to see if you could help me with that. So I'm a huge fan of using micro communities to grow the online business rather than just using cold traffic to drive people into a very big community. Like use the micro community to then open up the relationship to point them to the bigger communities. That makes sense?
It does. It makes sense to me. So, but if I'm going to play devil's advocate. If I'm a solo entrepreneur, how do I know what my micro community is, or how do I start my micro community?
This is a great question. I love it. So I find for so many people who are solopreneurs, they're amazing at what they do. And I've totally been guilty of this myself, where I can't see the forest for the trees because I'm like, well, this stuff is easy. Like, why? Let me just help you solve this bigger problem. Why would I waste time doing a small thing? And then so I have to go back in time and really think like, what was a small specific problem that was a problem for me 5 years ago, 10 years ago? Or ask my people, like, what is something that you're struggling with? And so I have found time and time again, if I can help my perfect people just get that one thing that's been on their to-do list for the past 90 days or for 6 months, and just break it down and be like, hey, I'll help you get this one thing off your to-do list in the next 5 days, the next 7 days. That's a huge win for my perfect person. And now they're going to be able to build a relationship with me by me just demonstrating my ability to help them. That's where I would tell somebody to start.
That's awesome. That's perfect advice. Thank you.
As an executive, we know that it can be difficult to manage your work-life balance, find time to tackle all the items on that to-do list, or determine next steps to bring your business to the next level. Virtual Assist USA is your solution. Whether you need someone to help you with those daily tasks, or you would like to speak to someone about strategies for the next steps for your business, we are here to help. Find us today at www.virtualassistusa.com to find out what else we can do for you.
Support for today's episode comes from Ruby, the #1 client communication solution for growing businesses. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Ruby creates exceptional experiences for your callers and website visitors. They take messages, screen and transfer calls, schedule appointments, perform new client intake, confirm details with outbound calls, and much more. Just like an in-house receptionist, only better. Because they turn every ring into a relationship. It all adds up to more opportunities and more time saved. For more information, visit get.ruby.com/virtualassistusa for up to $150 off your first month of service with Ruby. Imagine you powered by Ruby.
You're welcome.
So what's your last key?
Yeah, so this is my favorite key, and I always tell people to leverage what I call the BCC method. Now, the BCC method stands for like Bite Size Bootcamp plus community equals clients. And so this kind of comes and hinges on this idea of using micro communities. So it's like, okay, well, if we could create a Bite Size Bootcamp. So for example, if a life coach was like, hey, let me help you increase your capacity to love yourself, which always changes everything in my experience. Like, it makes your marriage better, it makes your parenting better, it makes your business, it makes the whole world completely differently better. But it's a big thing to be like, hey, let me help you love yourself, right? If you instead say, hey, let me help you rewire your money stories in the next 14 days, that's something specific. If somebody's teaching Instagram marketing and they're like, hey, let me teach you how to use Instagram to generate, to grow your business or whatever, that's a huge thing. If we said, hey, let me help you create your first reel or create a reel within the next 5 days or a week's worth of content in the next 5 days, that's something small and specific. And then what we can do once we have this micro community, you could use gamification to help pull people through the experience. So if we've been in business online for any amount of time, we know that probably 1 to 3% of people who buy a course are only going to complete it. So there's this huge portion of people who buy things that they never use. And there's been plenty of studies that show gamification is a great way to just help incentivize people to do the very thing that they've paid you to help them learn to do. So give them points for making the post, give them points for watching the video, give them points for completing an action item, but then take it further and give them incentivization. And so on the last day of your Bite Size Bootcamp, if it's day 5, day 7, day 14, day 21, tell them, hey, you see all these points that you've acquired, those become dollars, and you could leverage those into the next step. And then you could cast a vision, and then they could apply those points to the next experience with you, whether it's a coaching experience with you, or maybe it's money back on the original purchase. Like, we could think through a whole bunch of ways to like incentivize and redeem these points. And this is then what starts naturally allowing people to be pulled through the little micro community, the Bite Size Bootcamp, and then warm people up and nurture them, and then leverage all of those points that they've acquired into that next step with you. This is my very favorite way right now for like building highly engaged communities and then naturally warming people up to what's next.
Do you ever talk about using, so that was a perfect scenario, and thank you for giving an example for our listeners to visualize how to do this. Do you ever talk to anyone about applying these micro community ideologies to their employees?
I haven't applied this to employees. I have applied this to software companies, and this way of thinking to software companies for their onboarding process. And that's been working actually pretty well.
Yeah, I just, my brain, being in the HR space for so long, it naturally goes to, does this work for creating an engaged employee group, right? Could you use, a point system with training courses and icebreaker type activities to warm your employee engagement as well? So just something in the back of my brain, and I hope my audience's brain can be, I assume it will work the same way, but
it would
to be determined.
It would completely work the same way. And it's going to be 100% dependent on how the leader is going to lead. So if I apply this way of thinking to employee orientation and they're added into the online community, there's going to be a welcome post, and the welcome post would need to say, hey, welcome Here's our values, here's what we're about, but then cast the vision, which would be like, over the next 7 days, here's what I want you to do, and cast that vision for them as a leader. And then, yeah, the gamification pieces are going to help pull them through kind of that onboarding process. But then the question becomes, as the owner of the company, as the CEO, or as the head of HR, how would you let employees redeem those points? Like, could those points be applied to vacation? Could those points be applied to earning sick days? Like, how could you allow them to redeem the points? And this is where I think a lot of people go wrong, especially when they're using gamification. It's like, okay, cool, you gave people points, but it's kind of like this for me. Could you imagine going to Chuck E. Cheese's, getting all the tickets, but then there's no prize redemption counter? Like, could you imagine that, Nicole?
No.
I can imagine that. And I'm like,
I can with my 2 toddlers screaming.
Do you think they would have fun? Your 2 toddlers, would they have fun at Chuck E. Cheese if there was no prize redemption counter?
No one would. No one would.
Exactly.
The employees that work there wouldn't, because they deal with crying kids all day long.
Exactly. So just, we can see, like in the simple example of Chuck E. Cheese's, how the prize redemption counter is basically the holy grail for Chuck E. Cheese's in the whole experience. So why can we not apply that principle, I call it incentivization, to gamification, to then reward these people, our employees, or our customers or our clients, for participating and doing the very things that we want them to do?
I love it. So with all of this said, if you could tell our listeners to start doing this one action item today to better their company's success, what would it be?
I would tell them to literally build a community. Like, how can you build, again, that warm, intentful community that's based upon your values, that's based upon the vision? Like, you have this purpose, you have this cause. Like, how can you start really creating culture and community for your company? That's where I would really live in the question and find a solution for that.
Great. So as you know, our podcast is titled Not Your Average CEO Lifeline. Yes. Can you tell me what has been the best advice you've received as a business owner?
So the best advice I've ever received as a business owner has been, you have nothing to prove, you have nothing to defend, which I know sounds crazy and it's very kind of ethereal, life-based.
No.
But I found after coaching hundreds and hundreds of people, even people who have built 7- and 8-figure businesses, oftentimes they've built that business in a reaction, like this unconscious reaction of, they needed to either prove themselves to themselves or their family or to God. And then once they've obtained this thing, that pressure is still there. Like, they still have something to prove or defend, and they can't put their finger on it. So once they can like work through and realize, like, they don't have to prove or defend that they're not a loser, or they don't have to prove or defend that they're not whatever their unconscious foundation that they've built their thing in resistance to. Once they know, like, inside they're just okay, like there's still this foundation where they're going to create an empire or whatever it is they're called, but it's not coming from what I'd call like this old, I don't know, fossil fuel. Like, it has a shelf life that always kind of tends to burn out and frustrate people or get them to some place of apathy at some point in time, until they come home to the truth that they have nothing to prove, nothing to defend, not to themselves, not to their parents, not to their society, not to God. And then from this new place of like, they choose to create just because they choose to create, that's when they start creating things or relating to what they've created from a place of peace and joy. That's been my biggest lesson thus far.
I think, or I shouldn't say I think, I know it is very hard to overcome that, right? Even for me, who says to myself all the time, I have nothing to prove. It's something that's deep down, right? Whether it's how we were raised or just something in us, I have to chronically tell myself it's okay, right? And I'm sure, our listeners are saying the same thing. How do I reach that aha moment? But maybe it's something that's continuous, to just continue to remind ourselves, or do you not think about it anymore?
I think it's always there. I think it's part of the beingness of being human. There's always a part of us that's constantly asking this question. even unconsciously, am I going to survive? Like, it's part of the beingness of being human. And even if we take it deeper, there's the beingness of being human of this part of us that's like constantly like, I'm not okay in here. And it's just kind of online. It just is part of the beingness of being human. And so once we have an awareness of this, then we can just start watching it. You don't have to do anything, because even trying to do something, you're feeding. It's almost coming back to that Native American adage where you have two wolves on the shoulder, and it's like, well, which one wins? And you're like, well, whichever one you feed. And so if we're constantly like, oh, here's this part of me who feels like it's not okay, I have to do something to make sure he's okay, then we're constantly feeding the wolf. So it's like, just watch the wolf and just keep, just like you're doing, it sounds like. I'm fine. I'm good.
Right.
I'm fine. I'm good. And the more that we feed that wolf, the other wolf just starts diminishing. And so it really just comes down to disciplining your mind, which I know is simple to do, simple not to do.
That's correct. That's very correct. So my last question for you, as always on our podcast, is, can you explain to us what being not an average CEO means to you?
To me, being not an average CEO is really just coming back to caring about people, meeting them where they're at, having the emotional intelligence and the willingness and the courage to really see them, to really seek to understand them, to really see what they want, what is really a win for them. And how does that CEO also hold the space and lead towards the values and the vision of the company, while also holding the space to see all of the people inside of the company and making sure that it's always a win-win. It's not just a win for the company, or it's not just a win for the employees, but it's a win for the company and it's a win for the employees. How can both of those live in this and also world? And I find when a CEO does that, they build a very connected kind of communal culture of people of like-minded who wants to use their gifts and skill sets to like push that company forward, and they have great retention and a great working environment.
AJ, thank you so much for your insight. I think it was definitely invaluable. It was spot on and very current. Can you tell our audience where they can find more about you?
Yeah, just go to socialglow.com. That's where they can learn more about me. They can learn more about Social Glow and how we're helping people build highly engaged communities.
Thank you so much. I hope to talk to you again, maybe in season 3.
Sounds great, Nicole. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You've been listening to Not Your Average CEO Lifeline with your hosts Danielle Cuomo, CEO, and Nicole Glitchio, Els, COO. This podcast has been sponsored by Virtual Assist USA. If you'd like to know more about the hosts or exploring virtual assistant services, visit virtualassistusa.com for more information.